Emma Harrison smoothed down her navy blue dress as she stepped out of the car, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. Sophie had chosen this restaurant, one of the newest spots in downtown Manhattan, and Emma had been looking forward to this night all week. Between late nights at the office and Richard's recent distance, she needed this time with her friends. Sophie waved from the entrance, her bright smile infectious as always. Grace stood beside her, elegant in a cream blazer, checking her phone. These two women had been Emma's anchor through everything, from college days to career struggles, and tonight was supposed to be about celebration. Emma had just closed a major account at work, and Sophie insisted they toast properly. The restaurant buzzed with energy. Soft jazz played in the background while candlelight flickered on white tablecloths. The hostess led them to a corner booth with a perfect view of the main dining area. Emma settled into the leather seat, finally allowing herself to relax. Sophie ordered a bottle of wine while Grace launched into a story about her latest fashion show disaster. Emma laughed genuinely for the first time in weeks. She hadn't realized how much tension she'd been carrying until this moment. Richard had been working late for months, always tired, always distracted. Their conversations had become transactional, limited to bills and schedules. But tonight, she pushed those thoughts away. Tonight was hers. The wine arrived, and Sophie raised her glass. To Emma, the brilliant strategist who just landed the Richardson account. "You're unstoppable." They clinked glasses, and Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. This was what she needed. Connection. Celebration. Presence. Grace was mid-sentence about a difficult client when Emma's gaze wandered across the restaurant. She was simply taking in the ambience, noting the beautiful decor, when her eyes landed on a familiar figure near the window. Time stopped. Richard sat at a table for two, his body angled toward a woman Emma didn't recognize at first. The woman was younger, with long dark hair and a fitted red dress. She laughed at something Richard said, touching his arm in a way that made Emma's stomach drop. Sophie's voice faded into background noise. Emma couldn't look away. She watched Richard lean closer to the woman, watched him smile the way he used to smile at her years ago. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers, but close enough that intent was clear. "Emma?" Grace's concerned voice cut through the fog. "What's wrong? You look pale." Emma didn't respond immediately. She was cataloging details with strange clarity. The wine glass in front of Richard was his favorite red blend. The woman wore delicate gold jewelry. Richard's jacket hung on the back of his chair, the same jacket Emma had picked up from the dry cleaners last week. Sophie followed Emma's gaze and gasped softly. "Oh no. Emma, is that Richard?" Grace turned sharply. "Who is that woman?" Emma finally found her voice, surprised by how steady it sounded. "I don't know." Sophie's hand gripped Emma's arm. "We need to go over there. You need to confront him right now." But Emma shook her head slowly. Something inside her had shifted in that moment. Instead of the explosion of anger she might have expected, she felt a cold, clear understanding washing over her. This explained everything. The late nights. The distance. The way he flinched when she touched his phone. The excuses and the exhaustion that never quite added up. "Emma, come on," Grace urged, already starting to stand. "You can't just sit here." "Yes, I can," Emma said quietly. She picked up her wine glass and took a deliberate sip, her eyes never leaving her husband and his companion. She watched them for another minute, noting the easy intimacy between them. This wasn't a first dinner. This wasn't casual. The woman knew how Richard liked his steak cooked because she didn't ask when she mentioned it to the server. Richard knew she preferred white wine because he'd already ordered it before Emma had even noticed them. Sophie and Grace exchanged worried glances. They'd expected tears or rage, not this eerie calm. "What are you thinking?" Sophie asked gently. Emma set down her glass carefully. "I'm thinking that making a scene won't change what I just saw. I'm thinking that I need to understand the full picture before I react. I'm thinking that I refuse to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart in public. Grace reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. You're stronger than I would be. I don't feel strong, Emma admitted. I feel like I'm watching my life from outside my body. But I know that if I walk over there right now, I'll say things I can't take back. I'll cry in front of strangers. I'll give him reasons to make excuses. And I'm not ready for that. Sophie signaled for the check. Then let's get you out of here. Emma nodded, grateful. As she stood, she allowed herself one last look at Richard and the woman. They were completely absorbed in each other, unaware they were being observed. Richard said something that made the woman laugh, and she touched his face with casual affection. That gesture broke something in Emma. Not her resolve, but her last thread of hope that maybe she was wrong, maybe this was innocent. That touch told her everything she needed to know about how long this had been going on. The three women walked out of the restaurant together. Emma kept her head high, her shoulders back. If anyone was watching, they would see a confident woman leaving with her friends, not a wife whose world had just shattered. The night air hit her like a slap. Sophie's car was parked nearby, but Emma shook her head. I need to walk for a minute. We're not leaving you alone, Grace said firmly. They walked in silence for a block. Emma's heels clicked against the pavement in a steady rhythm that somehow grounded her. Her mind raced through memories, re-examining everything through this new lens. The weekend Richard said he had to work but came home smelling like perfume. The mysterious charges on their credit card he explained as client dinners. The way he'd stopped asking about her day months ago. How long do you think it's been going on? Emma finally asked. Sophie hesitated. Does it matter? Maybe not, Emma said. But I need to know. I need to understand how blind I've been. They reached a small park and sat on a bench. The city lights twinkled around them, indifferent to Emma's crisis. She thought about the woman in the red dress. Young. Beautiful. Attentive. Everything Emma had been trying to be while juggling her demanding career and maintaining a home and somehow keeping a marriage alive that had already died. What are you going to do? Grace asked softly. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened her spine and looked at her friends with clear eyes. I'm going to go home. I'm going to gather evidence. And then I'm going to decide what kind of future I want. But whatever I do, I'm doing it on my terms, not because I caught him in the middle of a romantic dinner. Sophie hugged her tightly. We're here for whatever you need. As Emma finally headed to her car alone, she felt something unexpected beneath the pain. It was small but growing stronger with each breath. It was clarity. For the first time in years, she saw her life exactly as it was, not as she'd been pretending it to be. And while the truth hurt more than she could have imagined, it also set something free inside her. Tonight, she'd seen her husband with another woman. Tomorrow, she would begin seeing herself clearly too. Emma drove home through empty streets, her hands steady on the wheel despite the storm raging inside her. The apartment was dark when she arrived. Richard wouldn't be home for hours, clearly. She moved through the rooms she'd decorated with such care, seeing them differently now. Every choice she'd made to create a happy home felt like evidence of her own delusion. She made tea she didn't drink and sat at Richard's desk. His laptop sat closed, password protected, but Emma knew it. She'd always known it. He'd given it to her years ago when they still shared everything. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for only a moment before she typed it in. The emails loaded slowly, each one a small betrayal. Jennifer Cole. The name appeared again and again. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. The intimacy was in the details. Inside jokes. Plans made during work hours. References to places they'd been together. Emma scrolled back months, watching the progression from professional to personal to something that made her chest ache. She found receipts. Hotel rooms. Jewelry she'd never seen. Dinners at restaurants Richard claimed were client meetings. The evidence mounted until Emma felt numb from the weight of it. When Richard's key turned in the lock at midnight, Emma was still sitting at his desk, the laptop screen illuminating her face. He walked in smiling, loosening his tie, and froze when he saw her. "Emma. You're still up. Sit down, Richard." Something in her voice made him obey. He sat across from her, and she saw the moment he noticed the laptop, the open emails. His face went pale. "It's not what you think," he started, the words automatic. "Stop." Emma's voice was quiet but cut through his excuse. "I saw you tonight. At the restaurant. With Jennifer Cole." Richard's mouth opened and closed. He looked young suddenly, caught and panicking. "Emma, I can explain. It's just, we worked together and things got complicated, but it doesn't mean anything." Emma laughed, a bitter sound she barely recognized. "Doesn't mean anything?" "Richard, I've been reading your emails for 2 hours. I've seen the receipts. The hotels. The lies you've told me while I was working late to help pay for the life we built together." "You're always working," he shot back, then seemed to realize his mistake. "I mean, I felt lonely. You were so focused on your career. So this is my fault?" Emma stood, her calm cracking slightly. "I worked hard because we had goals. Because you said you wanted to save for a house. Because I was building something I believed we both wanted. And while I was doing that, you were building a relationship with someone else." Richard ran his hands through his hair. "It just happened. These things happen, Emma. We can work through this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want." Emma looked at the man she'd married and realized she was looking at a stranger. When had he become someone who could lie so easily? Or had he always been this way, and she'd simply refused to see it? "I don't want you to end it because I found out," Emma said slowly. "I want to have married someone who would never have started it." She walked to their bedroom and began packing a bag. Richard followed, pleading now, promising change. But Emma moved with purpose, taking only what she needed. She'd figure out the rest later. "Where are you going?" Richard asked, genuine fear in his voice now. "A hotel. I need space to think." "Emma, please. Don't do this. We can fix this." She turned to face him one last time. "You did this, Richard. Not me. You made choices every single day for months. And now I'm making mine." The hotel room was sterile and cold, but it was honest. Emma lay in the unfamiliar bed and finally let herself cry. Not for Richard, but for the version of herself who'd believed in something that was already broken. 3 days later, Emma returned to work with dark circles under her eyes but her head held high. She'd told Sophie and Grace everything, and they'd surrounded her with fierce support. Now she needed to focus on the one thing that had never betrayed her, her career. The industry conference came at the perfect time. Emma threw herself into preparations, grateful for the distraction. She'd been invited to speak on a panel about digital marketing strategies, and she was determined to deliver her best work. That's where she met Olivia Brooks. Olivia was everything Emma aspired to be: successful, confident, unapologetically herself. The older woman approached Emma after her panel, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "That was brilliant," Olivia said, extending her hand. "I've been watching your work for months. The Richardson campaign was masterful." Emma felt herself stand a little straighter. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." They had coffee that turned into lunch that turned into a 3-hour conversation about business, life, and the courage it took to bet on yourself. Olivia shared her own story of divorce, reinvention, and ultimate success. "The worst thing that ever happened to me," Olivia said, "turned out to be the catalyst for the best decision I ever made. Leaving my marriage freed me to become who I was always meant to be." Emma felt something shift inside her. For days, she'd been viewing Richard's betrayal as an ending. But what if it was actually a beginning? Over the next few weeks, Emma saw Olivia regularly. The mentorship was informal but invaluable. Olivia introduced Emma to people, recommended her for projects, and more importantly, reminded her daily that she was capable of standing alone. It was at another industry event that Emma first really noticed Julian Rhodes. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone knew Julian. At 38, he'd built a venture capital firm that was reshaping tech investment. He was powerful, wealthy, and had a reputation for being brilliant but demanding. Emma was presenting her ideas for a new client campaign when she felt someone's focused attention. She looked up to find Julian watching her with genuine interest. Not the kind of attention that made her uncomfortable, but the kind that suggested he was actually listening to her ideas. After the presentation, he approached her directly. "Emma Harrison," he said, and she was surprised he knew her name. That approach to integrated marketing is exactly what most companies are missing. "Have you considered consulting independently?" They talked for 20 minutes, and Emma found herself energized in a way she hadn't felt in months. Julian asked questions that challenged her thinking, offered insights that expanded her perspective, and treated her like an intellectual equal. When Richard called that night, asking to meet and talk, Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted closure. Part of her was terrified of falling back into old patterns. They met at a neutral cafe. Richard looked thinner, tired. He started with apologies that sounded rehearsed. "I ended it with Jennifer," he said. "I told her it was a mistake. Emma, I want to fix our marriage. I'll do therapy, whatever you need." Emma studied him carefully. "Why did you end it? Because you realized it was wrong, or because you got caught?" Richard faltered. "Does it matter? I'm choosing you." "You're choosing the idea of me," Emma corrected gently. "You're choosing stability and comfort and not having to explain to your family why we're separating." "But Richard, you stopped choosing me months ago. Maybe years ago." "That's not fair." "Maybe not. But it's true." Emma left that meeting knowing she'd made her decision. She filed for separation the following week. The paperwork felt both terrifying and liberating. Her career, meanwhile, was flourishing. Olivia recommended Emma for a major promotion, and Emma interviewed for a department head position she'd never dreamed she'd be qualified for. To her shock and pride, she got it. Julian continued to appear at industry events, and their conversations grew longer, deeper. He asked about her ideas, her goals, her vision for the future. He never asked about her personal life, though Emma suspected Olivia had told him something about her situation. One evening, after a particularly successful product launch, Julian invited Emma to dinner. Just the two of them. Emma felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with business. She was still technically married, still healing, still uncertain. But she was also alive in a way she hadn't been in years. At dinner, Julian was charming but respectful. He talked about his own journey, his failures and successes. He asked Emma about her dreams beyond her current role. "I see you building something bigger than a department," he said. "I see you running your own firm someday." The idea took root in Emma's mind like a seed finally finding fertile soil. As they left the restaurant, Julian walked Emma to her car. Under the streetlights, he looked at her with something that made her breath catch. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "And I want you to know there's no pressure, no expectation. But Emma, I admire you. Not just your work, though that's exceptional. I admire your strength, your integrity, the way you've handled everything you've been going through." Emma's heart raced. "How do you know what I've been going through?" "Olivia mentioned you were navigating a difficult personal situation. I didn't ask for details because they're yours to share or not share. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd very much like to know you better. As more than a colleague." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. "Julian, I appreciate that more than you know. But I'm still figuring out who I am outside of my marriage. I'm not ready for anything new. I understand completely, Julian said, and his smile was genuine. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. That night, Emma lay in her new apartment and realized she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for a relationship with Julian, though that possibility glowed warm in her chest. But hope for herself, for her future, for the woman she was becoming. Richard's betrayal had cracked her open, but what was growing in that broken place was stronger than what had been there before. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning 6 months after Emma had first seen Richard with Jennifer at the restaurant. She signed them without hesitation, each signature feeling like permission to breathe fully for the first time in years. Emma's office reflected her new position. Corner suite, windows overlooking the city, her name on the door with the title Director of Strategic Marketing. She'd earned every inch of this space through late nights, brilliant campaigns, and a work ethic that had only intensified since her separation. Sophie and Grace met her for lunch to celebrate the finalization of her divorce. They raised glasses of champagne in the middle of the day, giddy with the symbolism. To freedom, Sophie declared. To new beginnings, Grace added. To becoming who I was always meant to be, Emma said, and meant it with her whole heart. The waiter who brought their food did a double take at Emma, and she realized with a small shock that she'd been so buried in work and healing that she hadn't noticed men noticing her. She'd lost weight without trying, started running in the mornings, cut her hair into a sleek style that framed her face. She looked different because she was different. That afternoon, Emma had a meeting with Julian. His firm was considering partnering with her company on a major tech startup launch, and Emma had been chosen to lead the marketing strategy. She arrived at his office building with her presentation polished and her confidence solid. Julian's assistant led her to a conference room where he was already waiting, reviewing documents. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was warm and genuine. Emma. Thank you for coming. They spent 2 hours dissecting the project, challenging each other's assumptions, building something better together than either could have created alone. Emma felt electric with creative energy. This was what she'd been missing in her marriage, she realized. True partnership. Mutual respect. Someone who made her sharper rather than smaller. As the meeting wrapped up, Julian hesitated. I heard your divorce was finalized. How are you feeling? Emma considered the question honestly. Lighter. Clearer. Ready. Ready for what? She met his eyes. Ready for whatever comes next. Something shifted in the air between them. Julian stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. I've tried to be patient, Emma. I've tried to give you space. But I need you to know that my interest in you hasn't wavered. If anything, watching you rebuild yourself these past months has only deepened my admiration. Emma's heart thundered in her chest. She could play it safe, tell him she needed more time. But she was done playing it safe. She was done waiting for the perfect moment. She stood and crossed to where he was standing. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I know, Julian said softly. You're better. Stronger. More yourself. I have trust issues now. Scars. I question everything. I would expect nothing less. Emma took a breath. I'm not looking for someone to save me or complete me. I'm already whole. Julian's smile was beautiful. That's exactly why I'm interested. Their first real date happened 3 days later. Dinner at a small Italian restaurant, conversation that flowed like wine, laughter that felt genuine and free. Julian told her about his first failed business, his complicated relationship with his father, his fear of never finding someone who understood him. Emma shared her journey through grief to strength, her plans to maybe start her own consulting firm someday, her newfound joy in simply being alone without being lonely. When Julian walked her to her door, he didn't try to kiss her. He simply took her hand and said, "Thank you for giving me a chance." Emma squeezed his hand back. "Thank you for waiting." The following weeks unfolded like a dream Emma had forgotten she was allowed to have. Julian courted her properly, with flowers and thoughtful gestures and respect for her boundaries. They went to art galleries and tried new restaurants and talked until 3 in the morning about everything and nothing. It was during this time that Emma learned the full truth about Jennifer. Grace, who still had connections at Richard's company, heard through the grapevine that Jennifer hadn't been the first affair. There had been others before her, discreet and hidden. Richard had a pattern Emma had been too trusting to see. The revelation should have devastated her. Instead, Emma felt vindicated. Her decision to leave hadn't been an overreaction. It had been self-preservation. When Richard called her, begging for one more conversation, Emma almost declined. But curiosity won out. They met at a park, neutral and public. Richard looked different. Older somehow, more uncertain. "I heard you're seeing someone." "Julian Rhodes." Emma didn't confirm or deny. "Is that why you wanted to meet?" "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally understand what I lost." He looked at her with something like desperation. "You're glowing, Emma. You look happy in a way you never looked with me, and that's killing me because I realize now that I made you smaller. I took your light and dimmed it so I could feel bigger." Emma felt a wave of compassion mixed with firm resolve. "I appreciate you saying that, Richard. I really do. But understanding what you did doesn't undo the damage." "I know. But I'm asking anyway. Is there any chance we could try again? I've changed. I'm in therapy. I understand now what real love requires." Emma looked at the man she'd once promised forever and felt nothing but gentle distance. "I forgive you, Richard. Truly. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You taught me what I won't accept anymore. And ironically, that's the greatest gift you could have given me." She stood to leave, but Richard grabbed her hand. "Please, Emma. Don't throw away 6 years." "I'm not throwing them away," Emma said gently, pulling her hand free. "I'm learning from them. There's a difference." As she walked away, Emma felt something she hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for the betrayal itself, but for the clarity it had forced upon her. Richard had broken her heart, but in doing so, he'd freed her to discover her own strength. Julian was waiting for her at her apartment when she got back, having texted that he'd pick up dinner. He took one look at her face and pulled her into a hug. "How did it go?" "It went exactly how it needed to," Emma said, breathing in his warmth and solidity. "He asked for another chance." She felt Julian tense slightly. "And what did you say?" Emma pulled back to look at him. "I said no. I said I've learned what I deserve, and settling for less isn't an option anymore." Julian's smile was worth everything. "You are extraordinary, Emma Harrison. I'm learning to believe that." 3 months later, Emma stood at another industry conference, this time as a keynote speaker. She talked about resilience, about turning pain into purpose, about the courage it takes to start over. The audience was rapt, and when she finished, the standing ovation felt like affirmation of everything she'd become. Julian was in the front row, his pride visible. Olivia sat beside him, her mentor and friend, beaming with satisfaction at the woman Emma had become. After the speech, journalists wanted interviews. Emma's story had somehow spread, the narrative of a woman who'd been betrayed and had used that betrayal as fuel to transform her entire life. She was careful not to villainize Richard publicly, but she was honest about her journey. That evening, as Emma and Julian walked along the waterfront, he stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I've been in love with you for months, but I wanted to wait until you were ready to hear it. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." Emma felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. And that terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure." Julian wiped her tears gently. "That's how you know it's real. They kissed under the stars, and Emma felt something click into place. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not desperate or diminishing, but expansive and empowering. 6 months later, Emma launched her own consulting firm. Harrison Strategic Solutions opened its doors with Julian as her first investor and Olivia as an advisor. Emma hired Sophie to handle operations and worked with Grace on branding. She built something entirely her own, on her own terms. The firm's success exceeded every projection. Emma's approach, born from her own experience of transformation, resonated with clients who wanted authentic, courageous marketing strategies. 1 year after signing her divorce papers, Emma found herself back at the same restaurant where she'd first seen Richard with Jennifer. This time, she was there for a celebration dinner. Her firm had just landed its biggest client, and Julian had insisted on celebrating properly. As she walked in, Emma felt no pain, no residual hurt. She felt only gratitude for the journey. She glanced at the table where Richard had sat that night, now occupied by a young couple laughing together, oblivious to the history that spot held for her. Julian squeezed her hand. "You okay?" "Better than okay," Emma said truthfully. "I was just thinking about how that night, the worst night of my life at the time, was actually the beginning of the best chapter." They were seated at a beautiful table by the window. As Emma looked around the restaurant, at the life she'd built, at the man who loved her for exactly who she was, she felt profound peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Just saw Richard posted about his engagement to Jennifer. You okay?" Emma smiled and typed back, "I'm more than okay. I'm free." And she was. Free from the need for his validation. Free from the smaller version of herself she'd been trying to be. Free to love fully because she'd learned to love herself first. Julian raised his glass. "To you, Emma. To the woman who turned betrayal into brilliance." Emma clinked her glass against his. "To new beginnings that sometimes look like endings." As they toasted, Emma caught her reflection in the window. She barely recognized the confident, radiant woman staring back. But that was fitting. She wasn't the same person who'd walked into this restaurant a year ago. That woman had been shattered by what she saw. This woman had gathered up the pieces and built something more beautiful than what had broken. Emma had seen her husband with someone else at a restaurant that night. And what she did next changed everything. Not because she fought for him or made a scene or fell apart. But because she chose herself. She chose dignity over drama, strength over suffering, and growth over grieving what was never really hers to begin with. The betrayal had hurt. But the rebirth had been glorious. And as Emma sat across from Julian, planning their future and dreaming bigger dreams than she'd ever dared before, she realized the most important truth of all: sometimes the person you're meant to become is waiting on the other side of the worst thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be brave enough to walk through the fire to meet her.